Hi everybody, Will Alexander here with Will Alexander's Dog Show Tips, brought to you by Canine Chronicle TV. Well, we have a special guest for you this week in the interview chair. It's going to be interesting. It's today's special guest is none other than Allison Alexander. So make sure you tune in. Hi everybody, guess who we have today? We have none other than Miss Allison Alexander. Hi Al, how are you?
I'm great, Will. How are you?
I'm good. Can you believe we're doing this?
Kind of, yeah. Kind of. I think I was a little upset that it took you this long to do it.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Well known fact for Will Alexander.
All right. Well, I'm always a little slow to it,
Yes.
Anyway, let's get started.
All right.
How old you were and tell me what age you were when you got started in the sport of dogs and how did you get involved?
Well, I was 7. And my parents, my dad worked in a prison, and my parents wanted a guard dog, so they were going to get a Doberman, and they accidentally bought an Afghan hound. So she wasn't a great guard dog, and we eventually did get a Doberman. But the thing about that Afghan hound is that the people really wanted us to show it. So we bought it from Jim and Doris Deptouch, and Doris has since passed away, and their 2 daughters, they have 3 daughters, but 2 of them, Tempest and Laurel, they really wanted me to go in junior handling. So we never actually showed the Afghan ourselves, like that one, but we would follow them to the dog shows. Like my mom would groom it and we would follow them to the dog shows, and then they would show it. And like, that's back when, there were 50 Afghans at every dog show, even like on Vancouver Island. And I mean, I think the best she ever did was reserve. I don't think she ever finished, but Tempest and Laurel, like being older than me, and they had been out of junior handling for a year or 2, they were like, let's teach her how to be in junior handling. So they would tell me what junior handling was and kind of teach me a little bit. And so that's how I got started.
Well, there's more to it then. What else happened? Keep going.
All right. So what happened?
You had this first Afghan, your parents. What happened after that?
Okay, so what happened after that was the Deptouches also bred standard and miniature poodles. So they lent me a miniature poodle to go into junior handling. So now, like, I'm still 7, I think, like 7 or 8. And I go into my first junior handling competition, and I'm like so excited. And I've been practicing, and, there was 5 kids entered in my class. And how, like, you hear about those people who the first time they do something, they like win the 100-mile, or they win whatever they win, and they're hooked for life. I went 5th out of 5, and I cried. And I told everybody it was because, like, I got something in my eye, classic got something in the eye thing. But I still loved it. They still really encouraged me. I still loved the dogs. I still loved everything about it. And it was, my parents didn't have a lot of money. And it was truly the dog show community that allowed me to thrive in junior handling. Like, there were just, the Deptouches were obviously like a huge influence on my life, and just really, really looked after me and wanted me to succeed and taught me things and let me work in their kennel eventually. But there was so many other people. Like, there was the late Margaret Robertson, her and her husband with Basenjis. They would pick me up and drive me to sanction matches. Judy Sherb and her sister Jerry Sherb, they would take me to sanction matches. And some like championship shows and stuff. But back then, sanction matches were a big deal. I went to my first handling class. Valerie Gervais taught my first handling class. So it was just like really this community of dog people on Vancouver Island that really looked after me and wanted to nurture me in the sport. And like, so I eventually just started doing everything. Like, I would walk your Basenji and clean the crate and clean the water bucket. And I met a ton of amazing people. And of course, like at that time, I started learning what professional handlers were, and I saw like Susan Hillman in the ring, and she had two amazing assistants at the time. So it was Taffy Walker, who's Taffy McFadden now, and David Gignac. And eventually, like now I'm maybe 12, you know, and I've still been going third, and like, you know, every once in a while I'd win like the junior class and juniors. And my parents got a few more Afghans, and they got the elusive Doberman. And then my mom decided, you know, Afghans then didn't have the best temperaments in the world. And we bought an Afghan from Tully's Kennels out of the Dog World magazine, and we thought it was a great thing. Well, she wouldn't like crawl out from under the kitchen table for like 6 months. And so my mom kind of made it my job to socialize all the Afghans. And how did I socialize them? I had to show them in junior handling, and a lot of them were like, had very questionable temperaments. But it was really good for me because it taught me that I had to like learn how to really show these dogs and move forward and get, come against adversity. I wasn't really allowed to show something that was trained. I had to show something that my mom thought needed work, and having a breeding program of Afghans kind of lent to that, right? And then there was a lady that had Yorkshire Terriers, and I would show dogs for her and help her and like take her dogs up to ringside and take her little tables up to ringside. And I learned about Yorkies. And then being on the
How old are you now? Are you still 12-ish?
I'm still 12. I'm still kind of doing everything. So when I was 12, there was these handlers that lived in Bellingham, Washington, called Ted and Erlene Luke. And actually, Erlene just passed away just before Christmas. But they wanted me to work for them, right? But I mean, I'm still 12. I'm still going to school. So I worked for them during the summer, and I would work for them on weekends when I could get to the same shows that they went to. And they showed a lot of Siberian Huskies and Borzois, Case Hounds, a lot of like those, like not really poodly type breeds, but it was like I cleaned crates and changed water buckets and walked all the dogs on a leash and learned how to groom those double-coated breeds that I didn't really know much about. And it was a really, really good foundation because Ted and Erlene, you know, like they, in the scheme of winning, they didn't win 40 best in shows a year. They won like 4 best in shows a year. So it told you that you really needed to work at this sport to do things within it. And it was just really, really good for me. Around that same time, I mean, I might have been a bit younger. I might have been around 10 when I was really getting into junior handling. My parents gave me a miniature poodle because I was still too little to like really competitive with the Afghans, even though my mom made me show the spooky ones. But so I got a miniature poodle, and his name was Mikey. And I got him for Christmas, and I was so proud of him, and I was like learning how to groom, and like he was the first dog that I would blow him dry, and then somebody would say, that's not blown dry straight, like right down here at the skin, you need to, you know. And when you're 10 and you're blow drying a miniature poodle for an hour and a half, it seems like 4 days, but I would still go back and dry it more. So I take Mikey to his first sanction match. So remember, this is a sanction match, and I'm 10, and like I have the bowl Tupperware cut that my mom gave me, and
I remember the pictures.
yeah, thanks. People thought I looked like a boy, and so I put Mikey on the table, and I get disqualified from a sanction match because Mikey had 1 testicle. And I was like I could barely get that thing up onto a table, and I was like devastated, and like we tried every trick in the book, and like he always just had 1 testicle. So the depth touches, of course, took him back and put him in a lovely pet home, and I got another miniature poodle, which I called Mikey 2, and everybody thought it was because he was the second Mikey, but really it's because he had 2 testicles. So yeah, that was my Mikey story. So I'm 12. I probably worked for Ted and Erlene for 2 or 3 years. I went to some national specialties. Like I went to the Siberian national specialty a couple times, and I really learned a lot there. But now at this point, I still have all my friends are, you know, because I didn't usually stay with the Lukes, but I still had all the dog show community that would like take me to dog shows and let me stay with them, even though like I would work for Tenderloin during the day, and at night I'd walk my friends' dogs that took, or my parents' friends' dogs that took me to the shows. And, you know, it really just showed how you could succeed with just like the people that were around you. And I still always really looked up to, of course, Susan was just like this huge icon in my life. And then of course, Taffy and David. And it was just, you know, something that I was always like kind of like striving towards that. I worked for one weekend for a poodle handler in, that was in the States, but she came up to Canada for a circuit. So I think I worked for her for a whole circuit. Her name was Brenda Feek, and Laurel Depth Touch got me in touch with her, and I worked with her. So I kind of knew that I really wanted to like be better at poodles, like having a miniature poodle and always wanting a standard poodle. So eventually Taffy decided that she was going to go out on her own, and David was kind of out on his own half the time. He showed his own Westies and stuff a lot. And so it was really David, and backed up by Taffy, that said, you know, you should go work for Susan. And I was like, oh, I don't think like Susan would want me to work for her. And he's like, no, yeah, you should go work for Susan. That's what you should do. And so I talked to Susan, and she was like, yeah. And I was in school, and she was like so understanding. Like she was like, school is the most important thing. Like, you know, all summer long, that's great. And whatever shows you can make it to, you can make it to, but school is the most important thing. But I was just like, so like blown away to be able to work for Susan. It was just like a dream come true. And she was like,
sorry, not to interrupt, but just people that might not know, give us some background on Susan.
So Susan Hillman was a handler in the Lower Mainland area, but she was like famous basically all over North America, if not the world. And she had worked as an assistant for Pat Tripp, who was like the winningest handler. You know, she'd won back-to-back Top Dog All Breeds with a miniature poodle. Like she had just done so many things. So Susan Hillman and Tim Brazier, who is a very famous now retired poodle handler in the US, both worked for Pat Tripp at the same time. So if you can talk about like a bunch of icons being together and like developing more icons, you know, then Susan was basically the mother of Taffy, like when it came to dog shows and everything that she learned. And Susan was often called the first lady of dog shows. I think was the quote from Jane Forsyth, who said that if you bred her,
Mrs. Clark.
Mrs. Clark said that if you bred her to Janie, you would get Susan Hillman. So, I mean, really, is there a better compliment from, you know, God, like really the icon of our sport? So, I mean, to work for somebody like Susan was just like absolutely incredible. I mean, not only were you just working with like the top dogs all across Canada, I mean, the late Dick Mean and John Reeve Newson, like they hired her to show their dogs. Fred Petty, he, you know, hired Susan to show their dogs. It was just, you had like the icons of the sport, like coming to Susan's house, and you were showing and working and training and taking care of all of those dogs. And
a second, on a side note, I just want to say that Pat Tripp was the first Canadian handler ever nominated to be top professional handler in the States, or top woman professional handler in the States.
Right. And I mean, I didn't know Pat Tripp, but I mean, just everything that I've read about her, the pictures, learning from Susan. I mean, obviously, if she was the one that mentored Susan Hillman and Tim Brazier, like clearly no slouch, right? And, you know, there's just like so much history that's interwoven there that actually now sometimes if I mention Susan's name and people go, oh, I don't know who Susan Hillman was, I almost get angry, like even though I have no right to get angry, but it's just like, you know nothing if you don't know who Susan Hillman is, right? And so yeah, like that's kind of how I feel about it. Like I still feel like really protective towards those years, because they shape me not only as a handler, but like as a woman in the sport, as a woman that's trying to be successful, as a parenting figure, as even how Susan treated us, like her assistants, really taught me how to treat my assistants that have worked for me. She was like a true mentor in every sense of the word. Some of our favorite trips, we used to do a trip every year, and it's changed now, but we used to go down to Santa Clara and Santa Maria shows, Channel Cities in Santa Maria in California, in the Santa Barbara area. And then we used to spend the week in Malibu at Tim Brazier's kennel. So that's at the time that Tim lived in Malibu, and his kennel was right on the Malibu highway, right across from the beach. And we'd spend the whole week there because it was only like a 2-day show, then 5 days off. Then Santa Barbara was the next weekend, and we would go to the Santa Barbara show. But I'm telling you, like those 5 days, I mean, Mark Shanoff, Daniel Augustus, Mary Ellen Fischler, like Sean Nichols, Brian Cordova, like Curtis Smith, like all these people were Tim's assistants. And I could stay in the house with Tim or stay like with the kennel, like the assistants in the house down by the kennel, and I always stayed with them because like that's where the action was. Like there was so many, like Snapper, so Eaton Affirmed was that stud there. Like I would sit with Tim sometimes while he's just holding the 2 dogs together doing a breeding, and he would just talk, and like you just absorbed so much. Margot Durney lived there at the time, who had, you know, just backed all those famous poodles. I can remember the first time I saw Tim actually show a poodle. He was showing Rimskill Riot. And so we get to these shows in California, and I haven't met him yet. So we've just been doing this big trip down to California. We get to the first shows, and I can remember Clay Cody and Birgit Cody were together at that point, and they pulled up in their truck, and all these terriers came out in all these X-Pens, and I had never seen like so many different terriers. And then they all got done up and became different colors, and then they all got washed out and became, you know, like went back. But I saw Tim, you know, so obviously I was introduced to Tim, we set up with him, the whole thing, but then he goes in the ring and just shows Riot, and she is just everything, right? Like to me, she was just like, she was so glamorous, and she was groomed so glamorous, like especially for the time. And then Tim just like set her up, and then you just never really saw him again. He melted into the background, and she stood there like looking down her big long nose, like at the end of this loose lead. And I was just like, I was completely blown away. Like I was just like, I want to learn how to do that, right? Like that was so amazing. And like Susan and Tim would just like make fun of each other and joke about this dog and the other dog and the other thing. And it was just like learning through osmosis. Like you couldn't help but learn about something there because there was just so much information. I mean, to think that you could sit there with like Curtis Smith and Brian Cordova and Mark Shanoff and Daniel Augustus, who I still think is like one, like knows poodles inside out like nobody else to this day. Like you could just sit there with all these people, and they would just talk about everything, like the little 4-month-old toy poodle puppy running around the grooming room to Riot, to like all kinds of these dogs, that to Eaton Affirmed, just being in a kennel cut at stud there. It was so completely overwhelming in the very best sense of the word.
Sounds like it. I remember you telling me those stories. It's something else. So carry on. After that, you're working for Susan. Okay.
So now I work for Susan, and it's a lot of work. I'd never worked harder than I ever worked for Susan, but she was so incredibly fair. She appreciated everything that you did for her. If you made a mistake, you just owned up to it, and she was like, well, we probably won't do that again, right? Like, so she was just very fair, and she was so professional at all times. And we just had like so many amazing dogs like come through those doors, and I was so happy to be part of their career. And so then a bunch of things happened. So first of all, we went to the Metropolitan Dog Show in Toronto. And, you know, like at this point now I'm 18, and now my parents have split up, and I'm really trying to decide what I'm going to do with my life. And, you know, you have a bunch of people say, oh, you don't want to spend your life in dogs. But in your head, you're like, but I really do. And so I went to the Metropolitan Dog Show, and there was this guy there showing an Irish setter. And I think I asked to borrow his blow dryer, or he asked to borrow my blow dryer. I can't remember how it worked. But anyway, that was William Alexander. And so Will and I kind of like got to know each other, and we had a bit of a long distance romance, or a long distance getting to know each other, maybe a little bit of both. He dumped me on a date to go out with a pin. What were they called? The Sun Girl, the Sunshine Girl?
I don't remember.
Yes, you do. So in the newspaper, they would have some chick in a bikini, and Will flew to another dog show out west where I was when he had expressed previous interest in me, but dumped me to go out on a date with the Sunshine Girl. So anyway, through this time, Susan has been showing some poodles and some Airedales and done a lot of winning. So around the time that I met Will, Susan had been approached by Linda Campbell to show a dog called Terima the Moor. So Terima the Moor was, Barbara Humphreys had found him basically for Linda, and Bob and Elaine Whitney were handlers in, and Bob and Elaine were showing him, but Linda wanted him to maybe go somewhere else, maybe somewhere that Shih Tzus weren't winning all the groups, because Shih Tzus were so competitive in Ontario, and she also really liked Susan's grooming. And so we were at those same dog shows in Alberta, and Bob and Elaine were there, and they had Terima the Moor. And Terima the Moor was an Eaton affirmed, so a snapper son. So he was like a very, snapper was such an influential sire. So Susan said, I want you to come to ringside with me and look at a dog. And I'm like, okay. So we go to Standard Poodle Specials, and she showed me which dog, and his grooming wasn't really up to par at that point. And I remember looking in the ring, and Susan said, it's like that one there with Bob. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I didn't really see anything that fabulous about him. He didn't look that great to me. And then he went around the ring, and he just had all this carriage on this loose lead. And Bob had these big long legs from showing those Afghans, and he just looked really, really amazing. And Susan said, I think we're going to get him and show him. And basically the rest is kind of history in many, many ways. Terima the Moor, Mark, came to Susan, and I worked there, and she got him into condition and started showing him. And I think he won 13 or 14 best in shows the first year she showed him, and about the same or a little bit more the next year. And this is when dog shows were quite a bit bigger, and he was in the top 10 all breeds both times. I don't know if he was top non-sporting or whether Luke was still beating him with Shih Tzus being out east at that point. But Susan was really happy. So through all this, Lisa's a bitch, and her name is Pamela's Darling Lil, and she was the mother of Pamela's Manderley Spellbound, and bred Terima the Moor to her, and from that litter had Dawin Bannerwaver, who went winner's dog under Ed Biven at Poodle Club of America, and who went on to go best opposite at Poodle Club of America at least twice, if not 3 times, but once under Mrs. Clark. Then there was also
multiple.
Oh, he won 60 odd best in shows. He was number 2 all breeds, I think, in Canada 2 years in a row. Then there was Dawin Bounty Hunter, who was an American Canadian champion and ended up going to Scandinavia and became a top producer there, and actually just produced a litter in England a year ago from Frozen Seaman. There was Dawin Bag of Tricks, who was Trixie, who was the first standard special that I specialed for Linda, who was number 6 all breed, but number 2 non-sporting, which is why we ended up having a top 10 dog dinner in Canada, because I was upset that I was number 6 all breed and not going to have a dinner. So we invented the top 10 and had that dinner. There was another sister, Dawin Blaze of Glory, who was also an American Canadian champion, but more importantly, became like just a top producer for Linda as well. So from the, and I think there was 5, I think there was 1 more that finished their American Canadian champion. So from that first litter came 5 American Canadian champions, but multiple best in show.
The Trixie was the first one you special for Linda.
She was the first. Oh no, you're right. It was Diva.
Diva.
The first one that Linda bred.
Right.
Right.
Your first Best in Show was on Diva.
Right. My first Best in Show. Well, my first Best in Show was on
Linda's
CJ.
dogs is Diva.
Was on CJ.
Oh, I thought your first standard poodle Best in Show dog
Was Diva.
Diva.
Yeah. Dawin
Dark Diversion.
Yeah, Dark Diversion. You're right.
Yeah. JLC Dawin Dark Diversion.
Yeah. So while all of this is going on, I'm long distance dating Will, or Will's long distance dating me. But remember that this is a long time ago when we didn't have cell phones, there was only pay phones, and plane tickets were $1 million, and even phone calls seemed like they were $1 million at that point. And I'm going to go to Toronto. I'm going to move to Toronto so I'm closer to Will. And I'm going to work for Billy Milne. So Billy Milne was a handler that was in Ontario. He really liked me. He showed a lot of dogs with coat. He said he could use me as his assistant, and he really liked Will, and was basically helping the whole thing out. And I gave Susan tons of notice so that she hired another girl that came, and I helped train her so that Susan wasn't left without help, et cetera, et cetera. Well, during all of this goings on, Linda Campbell calls Susan's house, because this is like back when you had to call on Monday to find out how your dog did, because we couldn't text you 10 minutes after the breed like we do now, because not everybody had a cell phone. So Susan's away. I answer the phone. I tell her how her dog did. She asks how I am. I ask how she is. And she goes, oh, by the way, and I was planning on moving to Ontario on August 17th. And she said, by the way, if you hear of anybody, I'm looking for a new kennel manager starting in September, because my kennel manager is leaving. And I'm like, oh, what would that entail? And so, you'd have to look after these poodles and raise the puppies and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, on and on. And I said, well, I'm planning on moving there and I would love the job, right? It's just like one of those divine moments. And so from that phone conversation, I moved to Ontario so that Will and I could start a life together. And beginning of September, I moved to Dawin Kennels, and I started looking after the dogs and helping with the puppies. And basically, Will and I, that's how we got our start. That's how I got my start in poodles. Will was already a handler. He was showing Bouviers for the gangs, and he had an Irish setter that ended up being top dog all breeds that year. Oh yeah, this is Will Alexander.
I just feel weird that you're saying you're talking about Will. I'm like, oh, sorry.
It's Will. So yeah, so that's really how it came from my parents wanted a Doberman to me starting my career as a professional handler. Will and I starting a life together, me starting with Dawin Kennels, me, finishing up my relationship with Susan and all the people that really mentored me. And like I should mention, like through all of this, I mean, I still went to amazing places and I learned so much from Susan and her friends and David and Taffy and even Pat Gignac. And like, there were just so many people, I met Shannon, I met so many people during that time, Billy Milne, even like just people that consistently helped you. I developed a friendship with Luke. Like it was just all these people that come into your life and just shape you into the person that you are.
All right. And from there we had you can carry on. We had a successful career, but you go ahead. Go into all that if you want, but.
Well, from there, like the year that Will and I got together, so I'm starting this work for Dawin Kennels, but Will is showing an Irish setter, Beef, McCammon and Presario, who was top dog all breeds that year. And it was like such a hugely competitive year. I mean, there was camaraderie, but there was a lot of like cutthroat, like counting points, and we didn't have points that we didn't know really where everybody was. You had to like make it up from judging schedules and what people told you and phoning around to find out what won. But Will just worked like so hard with Beef and just like all the things that we did, and it just really like here Will and I were, and we were both really young. I was trying to be really good with poodles. I was getting people to notice me with a few poodles. I started showing for snip clip toy poodles, but they had really beautiful typey toy poodles, and once people saw my grooming compared to the grooming they had before them, I started getting other poodles. Of course, Linda was just like so supportive, letting me show the bitch called, and bred by Jordan Chamberlain actually, called JLC Dawin Dark Diversion Diva. And I think I won Poodle Club of Canada with her, but I won my first all-breed best in show on a standard poodle with her. Garrett Lambert and Jean Tremblay obviously were huge influences in our life too. Garrett was like, knew so much about dogs, and he was able to help, like, not only with sporting dogs or questions we had about that, but with poodles, with everything. And he was also showing a standard poodle that was a very famous prolific sire and a big winner. He showed the Pamela's Manderley Spellbound dog, and tons and tons of competition. But from that, Linda still let me show Trixie, which was Dawin Bag of Tricks, and she went on to win 27 all breed best in shows, which was like, for me, like a dream come true. And we just started, you know, going to more and more shows, working for Linda. But like, I'll be eternally grateful for everything Linda did, like really supporting me, letting, you know, Will and I both actually, but letting us show all those dogs that like came our way. Eventually we had the Dawin Highfalutin dog, who was Blaze of Glory, who we mentioned earlier. He was out of Blaze, and so, like, you know, from that first breeding with Trima the Moor to Dawin Highfalutin, who was just, he went best of opposite sex for sure at PCA 3 different times. He went best of opposite sex to best in show one time. He was top dog all breeds. The year that he was top dog all breeds, he had won more points to that point than any other dog had. And not only that, but he won in the US. The next year, I showed him 6 weekends in the US. I won 3 specialty best in shows and 3 all breed best in shows, including Cobo Hall. I won Cobo Hall, and I remember a year or two before that, I had watched Mark Threffall show Robert, Sally Lynn's Condor, at the Garden and go best in show. And I brought tears to my eyes because it was just such a performance, and I just love that dog so much. And I just thought they were so talented. And of course, he was owned by Julia Gassow, Sally Lynn Kennels. And when I went best in show under Ruthie at Cobo Hall, I won the Sally Lynn trophy for best in show. And I was just like completely blown away. Like, it was just like so surreal that, and Cobo Hall was 3,000 plus dogs at that time. It was a bench show. It was like such a huge thing for my career. Will and I have a son at this point, right? Like, there's just a lot going on. But I just had so many people when I won that, like, saying, this is my favorite dog show. I've always wanted to win here. People like Brian Still, and I mean, Kelly Fitzgerald ran the show, and there was Robin Novak, like just all of these people that just really like became our fast friends. Like even David and Ellen Roberts, they were showing dogs then. It was just like so many people were just like so behind you winning and doing those kinds of things. And it really was incredible. Like, it was just an incredible, like kind of full circle moment of like starting, but then also being able to win best in shows at huge dog shows in the US. And I remember going to Louisville. I remember going to Bucks and Trenton, and, you know, just all these shows with Dawin Highfalutin, and just really being able to make my mark, like no matter where I went with him. It just really was amazing.
It was exciting. I remember all those shows.
Yeah.
I remember that time we were, you were getting him ready and somebody was wandering around him, and you kept telling me to tell the man to go away. And I finally told you that man was judging best in show that night.
Yeah. Wasn't it Desi?
Yes. And I think you went best in show, didn't you?
Yes. It's like, can you get him away? He's bugging my poodle. And it's like, yeah. So, you know, there was many, there was Dawin, what was Gabriel? Dawin Heaven Sent was Gabriel. And although Gabriel was top non-sporting, but it was his influence as a sire that I think was like even more important for Dawin poodles, and like, at least for the part that I was there. But through that, then there was Kate. So she was Dawin Dark Duplicate. And so that's who I showed while I was pregnant, and actually Will ended up showing her at the end of that year. But she was just a bitch that I went best of opposite sex with her at PCA under Maxine Beam, which is again somebody that I just always held in like such high regard at dogs, and to win at PCA with her. I showed a Camelot toy poodle that I really, really love. Camelot Sees the Day, who went winner's dog 1 year at PCA and went best of opposite sex the next year under Doris Cozart. So actually, no, he went winner's dog under Doris Cozart, and the next year went best of opposite sex under Janie. There was just like so many great things that happened. I can remember Star White of Windstorm Saluki fame, and I remember that she called the kennel one day and she's like, "Hi, my name's Star and I have the Saluki and I really, really like her. I think she's really beautiful, but if you don't like her, I don't want you to show her. And I think that she could do really well at the all breed level, but I don't want to do that. But if you don't want to do that, I don't want you to show her." Like, she was just like, "I really want you to show my dog and love my dog, but if you don't, it's completely okay. And I understand." And I was like, okay, well, okay. And I couldn't quite place her because she mostly showed at specialties. And growing up on the West Coast during the time that George and Sally Bell had like Fantasia out, that was what I loved about, like, that's a Saluki I loved. I loved like little grizzle feminine Saluki bitches. And, you know, on the East Coast, the Salukis looked different. They were taller, they were flatter backed, they were bigger. There wasn't as many grizzle ones at the time. And so I remember them Star walking into the first show, because she was just going to meet me at the show with Lucky, was her name. And she was just, to me, she was this little grizzle bitch that reminded me so much of Fantasia. And I was just like, I immediately fell in love. And that became how I not only showed Salukis to great success, but also have bred some Salukis at Best in Show winners. And just like so many fortunate things happened from like living in that area during like kind of the heyday of dog shows and what was going on. And you know, at the same time, Will and I have a son, and we are, I don't know, I think sometimes we maybe selfishly didn't want him to get caught up in what we did, right? Like, we both showed dogs and we both did it so full time that we maybe kind of pushed him away from doing it. We wanted him to like forge his own path, which he has. Like, he's a brilliant writer, but at the time it was hard. It was hard to like find that balance and like figure out what we were going to do.
Well, he was so funny because he'd show in juniors, and if he won, he'd get upset because he thought he won because we were there watching. So he didn't like that, you know.
Yeah, and I remember one time we were going to help him with something, like help him hold his leash, and he wouldn't listen to us at all. But Colin, our friend Colin, came over and said, "Jamie, this is how you do it." And he's like, "Oh, okay." And he did it. And it's like, Will and I had been spent 15 minutes telling him to do that, but we knew nothing. But Colin tells him, and it's like, but he had.
Colin was our assistant for a while too. So.
Yes, but yeah, it was just like, you know, there was a lot going on at the time, but just, it was such a great time. I mean, you know, talking about Mark winning with Robert, but I mean, you could go to places and, you know, we had dinner with Mark and Bonnie Threffall, and just like, there were so many mentors, like so many people that had worked for like Bob and Jane and had just, you know, really put a lot of their life into the sport, and had been mentored, and then were willing to mentor more people. And it was a time when people, not that they don't do it now, but it's just a time where there was like so many great dogs, and dog shows were bigger and people gathered together at them. And I just remember it just being like kind of overwhelming, but still in a good way.
They were great. We had a lot of fun. So after, okay, what was next?
So now I think I'm still showing dogs for Linda. I showed, you and I parted ways, and was there stuff that I should have mentioned before I mentioned that part? No?
No.
So then there was another poodle with Linda, and her name was Dawin Stellar Performance, and her name was Stella. And I loved Stella. you know, I had whelped her and I just thought that she was amazing. And she was maybe a little slow to start, but she ended up becoming Canada's top dog all breeds in 2004 or 2000, yeah, 2004. She was everything to me. She the year that she was top dog, she was undefeated even at the breed level, and she had placed in the group every single time that I had shown her. And she won best in show half the time she won the group. She ended up, I think to this day, she's still the all-time top winning best in show bitch of all breeds in Canadian history. And she did really well in the US as well. She won some best in shows. And one of my favorite stories is, so the year before she was top dog, Mrs. Clark. So remember that Mrs. Clark is like called God at the dog shows and is like a poodle person, and like what she thinks or doesn't think about a poodle like just holds so much weight. And so I'm showing Stella. I really don't have any, I really am not trying to find Mrs. Clark to show to her, but she's showing at a really big dog show in Toronto, or she's judging at a really big dog show in Toronto. And but she's judging best in show. She's not doing the breed or the group. She's just judging best in show. So I might not even get to best in show. So I'm just not going to worry about it. So she's judging best in show the biggest day, the middle day. I win the breed in the group under whoever. And like this year, I think Stella ended up being like number 5 all breed. So she had been winning. But I have I'm not going to win best in show under Mrs. Clark. Like, she hasn't seen her. She doesn't know who she is. Like, and everybody's like, oh, do you think you have a really good shot with a poodle? I said, it's harder to win with a poodle under Mrs. Clark. Anyway, I went best in show under Mrs. Clark, and I was so completely blown away and happy at the same time. But I can remember my brilliant reply to when Mrs. Clark like pulled out the standard poodle and she hands me the best in show ribbon and she goes, what do you think of that? And I said, I think I'm going to pee my pants. And I was just like, I don't normally say things like that, but I was just like so blown away that Mrs. Clark like gave this kind of young, kind of unknown bitch like on the international scene or the North American scene best in show. And that really kind of set up Stella like for the next year to do a lot of the winning that she did. So early the next year in February, they had these huge dog shows at McCormick Place in Chicago. So there's 4 days of dog shows in Chicago. And this is when dog shows were first really starting to be televised, and they had people interviewing you and things like that. So they were big dog shows, they were grueling, and then you had the groups at night. So it's Saturday night and Mrs. Clark is doing the non-sporting group. So I really want to like place in the non-sporting group. I'm really going to try to win it. She said that she liked the bitch, but we're in like huge competition in Chicago. So Mrs. Clark judges the group, I go group first. So I'm so happy, but the TV crew interviewer guy has no idea who I am. And not that he should, but he kind of takes my arm and they whisk you out a different way out of the ring, and you have to go into this little cordoned off area. And before we can get to our little interview, and I don't even want to talk, the interview is nothing, but he says to me, oh, so you won the group? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, congratulations. I'm like, oh, thank you. He goes, you won the group under Mrs. Clark. I'm like, yeah, I know. He goes, no, but you won a group under Mrs. Clark with a poodle. I'm like, yeah, I know. He goes, no, I don't think that you understand like how important it is to win the group under Mrs. Clark with a poodle. And I said, but honestly, if you think about it, if I did win the group under Mrs. Clark with a poodle, I probably do know how important that is, right? Like I probably am aware of how important she is in poodles. So it was like kind of one of those moments where like somebody's trying to tell you how important that is that you won that, but I knew how important it was that I won that, right? But Stella just went on to be everything I ever wanted her to be. She was just an amazing dog to show. It was a good way to kind of wind up my time with Linda by going top dog all breeds. And it just kind of brought kind of like an end to that era. So it was pretty exciting.
What about you? We've already touched on a bunch of your mentors. And you stopped showing dogs when? What year did you stop showing dogs?
What year is it now? I think 2017.
What advice would you give for new handlers?
So new handlers or people that want to be handlers?
Both.
Well, for people that want to be handlers, I think it is find a mentor. I think the biggest problem with people looking for a mentor is, I always say this, if you ask 10 different people the same question, you're going to get 20 different answers, right? Like, people don't agree on everything. So I think that people, when they're looking for a mentor, have a hard time because they're looking for like 3 mentors. They don't kind of want to narrow it down. So they're getting conflicting advice out of everything. And then they kind of don't have a fairly clear path, right? And I think that that is problematic. I think that you need to choose one mentor, one person that you have researched. So it could be your breeder, it could be a handler in your area, but somebody that you have researched. You like how they, if it's you as a breeder, or you're a wannabe, oh yeah, the question was wannabe handler. So you're a wannabe handler, somebody that shows different breeds that you like, and somebody that takes really good care of their dogs, and as a person you like them. Like, I think it's important to like the person, not just like their success. And I think that you need to follow that path. Like, I think it's important when you pick a mentor to believe in them as your mentor and kind of have blinders on in the beginning, because you can't learn 3 different ways at once. Learn one way, learn how to do that to perfection, and then as you perfect it, then start going off that path a little bit to kind of bring in, you're going to follow Will as a mentor, but you're going to get to a certain point where, you've learned a lot from him. So then you're going to start picking up things from other people, right? The little nuances that fit more into maybe even just the dogs that you have at the time. But I think it's important to pick a path, stay on it, and then start adding things into it. But don't start with 3 mentors, because I think it'll be just much too confusing.
And you, obviously, with your school, you love teaching people and passing on knowledge. How did you decide on doing something like that? It's been very successful. How did you decide? You and Jamie do it together, but
right. So I think that, I wish I could say, oh, it was this big plan we had, but it really wasn't. So I do like teaching. I actually had a woman who asked me several times if I could give her a spray up lesson, like how to spray up a poodle. And I said, yes, of course, no problem. But usually I can only do it after Best in Show, and we just never connected. I'm at a little show in Quebec. This woman is there. I don't really even know her that well. I know who she is. She's very nice. She said, oh, would you have time today to give me a spray up lesson? And I'm like, yeah, I definitely would. And so the way I give a spray up lesson is basically I do it one time for you, then I take everything out, then I make you do it, and I tell you kind of what you're doing wrong, and then I make you take it out, and then we kind of do it together. So this is a process we're going through. And so we're on about the 3rd spray up of this poor poodle, and she says, can I tape you on my phone? And I'm like, yeah, no problem. So she tapes me, and at the end she goes, you should have an online school. And her name's Ann Kieran, by the way. So, and I'm like, oh yeah, no, I don't want to do that. And she goes, no, you should do it. And I said, no. She goes, first of all, I paid somebody $125 to give me a spray up lesson at a grooming show. And she goes, I learned more and I said, obviously I wasn't charging her. She goes, I learned more from you in 5 minutes than I learned with an hour with her. And she goes, you need to have an online school. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. And so she shows me a video, and it was horrible. I don't even know the woman's name, but it was taken at the wrong, I only know this because of our son, but it was taken at the wrong angle, like with the camera, like it was vertical instead of horizontal. She was wearing like dirty sweatpants, and she trimmed this Springer's leg for she trimmed it for 7 minutes and 9 seconds, because I watched the video twice. And at the end of the 7 minutes and 9 seconds said, oops, don't do that. And she had sold these courses for like a lot of money online. And I just thought, I can do better than that. And so thankfully, our brilliant son, he not only had he graduated from university, but he had gone back to Ryerson and taken a film degree. So then I started talking to him about it, and he was looking to do stuff for his resume, because a lot of people that are into movies, like you need to have movies on YouTube for your resume. So anyway, so James said, yeah. And so James was like the technical expertise, and I was the teacher, and we just decided that we were going to do some handling courses. We rented a space and did handling courses, and we took a course on how to have an online school. And I just really started thinking, you know, Canada is such a remote place. There's so many places that you can live and not have access to handling classes or somebody to groom your poodle or your Irish setter or whatever it might be. And if you think about it like this, like we were lucky enough to grow up in the sport, to learn how to do things from so many different mentors and to perfect it, right? But we have so many empty nesters. We have so many people that want to learn how to groom a poodle or an Irish setter or a spaniel or a beagle or whatever it might be, or learn how to show a dog, but they don't live near a handling class. They don't live near a mentor. They can't take 3 years out of their life and go work for a professional handler. There's lots of people who are empty nesters, so they're so used to taking their kids to hockey and ballet and basket weaving or whatever it might be, and now they don't have that, but they want to own a poodle and learn how to spray it up and show it. Where are you going to learn to do that? Well, now we have one resource, right? And because we have James can like professionally edits all of our videos. We have a platform, and I just really realized that I loved teaching, right? And I guess I didn't really realize that. And, you know, Will, I hope that you reflect on that. I don't reflect on it all the time, but every once in a while I think about it. You know, I think about how fortunate, you know, you were to have the mentors that you did, how fortunate I was to have the mentors that I did. But then every once in a while I take a deep breath and I look around and I see Adam and I see Jody and I see Crystal and I see all, you know, I see Colton, I see all of these people that worked for us, that we mentored. And I think, yeah, I guess I really have been a teacher all of those years as well. You know, we have Olivia, just like so many people. So now to have that teaching be like in a school, I just feel it's like so rewarding. I probably get 150 emails a week from people asking, how do I groom this? When are you going to have a course on that? How do I use this shampoo? I answer a lot of questions with lather, rinse, repeat. But it's still worth it. Like, it's still people asking questions, wanting that knowledge, wanting a mentor. And I'm not saying that learning everything online is perfect. Obviously it's not. But if you have a place to go where you can learn the basics, like at least now you know what a slicker brush is. You know what a properly blow-dried standard poodle looks like. You know what an Irish setter top coat looks like and how to, you know, fix that line between where you clipper the neck and where you're going to scissor the neck. Like, there's just so many amazing things that you can teach people online. And I really want dog show, you know, we talk about the decline in entries in dog shows. We talk about all these ways to fix it. I mean, recently the AKC has even allowed junior handlers to show non-purebred dogs in junior handling in an effort to increase entries, right? But really, maybe we need to increase entries by giving people the tools to be able to show the dogs themselves. Now, as an ex-professional handler, and as professional handlers are a huge, huge part of my friend group, professional handlers are definitely needed in our sport. They are definitely what has kept this sport alive through the downtime and entries. But I also truly believe that we need to arm the rebels, right? We need to help the owner handler that wants to show their own dog be as absolutely competitive as possible, because a high tide raises all boats, right? If the amateur has to compete against the professional like they do in dog shows, we have to raise the standard of that amateur so that they can be competitive. And if that amateur gets better, those pros have to stay on their toes, and so forth and so on. It just is better for our sport all the way around.
Competition makes good competition. Good competition makes good competition.
Very true. Very true.
Okay, well, we've covered a lot of things, Al. I'm going to have to ask you one more question, though, because we're running out of time. Now be careful, if you could go back and see the 20-year-old Allison, what advice would you give her?
Whew. Well, that's a very tricky, scary question, Will. But I do appreciate it. So I think I would tell 20-year-old Allison to breathe a little bit more. You know, that stage of my life was just so competitive, so wrapped up in dogs, so wrapped up in beautiful dogs, and so many mentors around me. And I really, you know, I don't really regret a minute of my life. I I wish that she had taken time to slow down and to breathe and to really and have enjoyed and maybe celebrated every minute a little bit more, because really I was starting to be very competitive with dogs that I really wanted to be competitive with. So I think I would have told her to slow down, to breathe, to maybe not take things so seriously. And by that, I don't mean not work as hard or not present my dogs the way I did, but to maybe have laughed a little bit more and maybe just enjoyed like everything that those dogs brought to my life and all the people that were surrounded with them. Like, I think that was probably really the heyday of dogs like throughout North America. Maybe gone to a few, slowed down, maybe not gone to as many dog shows, but just gone to the dog shows I really, really wanted to really kind of maximize what I could have gotten from that era. But yeah, I mean, I don't regret how I handled anything. First of all, I don't think regret is useful, but I guess I would have slowed down.
It's a good answer. It's a good answer. All right, Al, I'm going to have to let you go.
What?
I know. I'm only allowed so long.
Oh, all right.
But that was great. Thank you. And I hope you enjoyed yourself as well. It was good to see you.
Well, I must say that I very much appreciate you doing this, that I have enjoyed a lot of your interviews immensely. A lot of them have been with some of my mentors and some of the people that I have really looked up to, as well as you. And, you know, I just want to say to everyone, you know, the world's a little bit of a crazy place right now. So just take it as it is and try to stay safe.
Good advice.
Thanks, Will.
Well, I told you that'd be interesting and fun, all rolled up in one. Well, if you like what we're doing here, make sure you press the like, share, and subscribe button. If you want to get a hold of me at dogshowtips@gmail.com. Or if you just want to find out what's happening in Will's world, go to willalexander.net. Until next week, guys.